So the Call of Duty Modern Warfare crossplay beta is finally live, and it's generating quite a bit of controversy already on social media. So the question is it any good, and how does it compare to Battlefield 5? Well guys, this is BillyEatWorld again, and let's find out. Alright, so to kick off, just to give you a bit of background, I wouldn't really say that I'm a Call of Duty fan anymore. My taste in shooters has gotten a bit deeper these days, but like most people around my age, I grew up with the original Modern Warfare games, and I've got to admit the nostalgia was pretty strong when I heard that a new one was coming out. On the other hand though, I left the Call of Duty franchise quite a few years ago for good reason. Certain things about the format just annoy the hell out of me. And I've tried a couple of times to get back into it, but none of the recent games have really come close to the COD games that I loved back in the day and I cut my teeth on. The main thing though that I really loved about the old Modern Warfare games was the present day theme. The guns, the maps, they all just felt so familiar and recognisable. Whereas in some of the later, more futuristic games, I just didn't have that same suspension of disbelief, not to mention that the movement just didn't feel human-like at all. However, I love that in a Modern Warfare game you actually feel like a Special Forces operator, and I love how all the weapons, attachments and the other gear just makes sense. And that's probably the biggest thing that hooks me into this new game, and I can tell that a lot of people feel the same way. We all desperately needed a new modern FPS game. Now, as for the pros and cons of the game itself, well, to kick off, the most important one I think is that the beta feels smooth, it feels polished, and I haven't experienced any bugs as of yet. And that's super rare these days, especially considering Modern Warfare is built on a brand new engine, and let's just say that it's in a much better position now than BF5 was when it was in its beta stage. The gunplay and movement is also very smooth and pretty addictive actually, and I'm sure for that reason alone, COD fans are gonna love it. But as for Battlefield fans, well, I'm not so sure. You'll hear people talk about how it's different for this reason or for that reason, but overall to me, it still feels very much like a traditional COD game. For example, there's not an awful lot of weapon recoil to deal with, and as someone who's used to hardcore shooters like Insurgency, well, it does kind of get a bit boring after a while. And not just that, but the respawn time in the regular modes like TDM and Domination is still super short as well. So in other words, there's not a huge incentive to try and play slow to stay alive. Apart from kill streaks, which are actually one of the few things that really annoyed me in the original Modern Warfare games and have probably stopped me from coming back ever since. Because I mean, sure, they make you feel good when you get them, but at the end of the day, they're the definition of a win more mechanic, and all they do is encourage players to be campy and to pad out their KD. Now, apart from the nuts and bolts stuff, on the surface, the big thing that makes this game feel like classic COD, I think, is the overall aesthetic, which is obviously drastically different from Battlefield 5. And it obviously looks better than the original Modern Warfare games, but it's still got that similar art style, and the nostalgia of using all of those classic weapons from the old days really helps with the illusion as well. With the new engine and its support for ray tracing and all of that fancy stuff, graphically it definitely looks like a AAA shooter, and thankfully performance seems to be pretty good as well. But probably the one thing that did really annoy me about the graphics was the fact that player visibility seems to be pretty bad, especially in dark areas. So there you go, that's at least one thing that it does have in common with Battlefield 5. But finally, the last thing I want to mention in this part of the video is that the other big drawcard of this game is that it allows for cross-platform play and the use of mouse and keyboard on console. And this is something we've all been hoping would become a reality for literally years now, and hopefully it'll pave the way for cross-platform play on other FPS games like Battlefield someday as well. Obviously, this is going to become a huge deal when it comes to active player base later on in the life cycle of the game, and it also means the devs are thinking a lot harder about balancing for mouse and keyboard as well as just controller like they usually do. And not just that, I've got to say it's nice to finally be able to play an FPS game with a controller on PC or a mouse and keyboard on console, because the game actually lets you choose your preferred control type and then matches you up with players using the same. Alright, so to finish up, bearing all of that in mind, you might be thinking, that all sounds pretty decent, right? And sure, yes it is, if you're a COD fan, but that's not what this video is about. Because although it's not playable in the beta just yet, it actually goes live later this weekend, Modern Warfare will feature a new 32 versus 32 large-scale mode called Ground War, which is obviously aimed at being a Battlefield killer. And considering it's been 4 years now since we've seen a modern-themed Battlefield game, a lot of Battlefield fans are desperately hoping Modern Warfare might be the answer. And look, I don't know if it is just yet, but it does seem like a lot of players will probably try it out. And if they're not really COD fans, well, I think they'll eventually probably make their way back. As a Battlefield player, though, there's obviously a lot of things to like about Modern Warfare. Like I said, for example, the modern theme, which we haven't seen in a Battlefield game since Hardline. And with that comes a real old-school weapon and character customization system, something I really think Battlefield has been missing for the longest time now. Obviously, the 32v32 mode is also something a lot of people are looking forward to, but the thing is, I just don't know if this gameplay style and the map design will translate to that larger style format. And I don't know, maybe it will, maybe it won't, but one thing I am pretty sure of, and sorry to all the Battlefield players out there getting their hopes up, no matter how hard they try, I just don't think that they're going to get a large-scale Call of Duty mode to feel anything like a Battlefield game. But finally, the last thing I want to talk about before we finish this video is that in 2019, I don't think we can avoid talking about the biggest hurdle for any new game, which is the community itself. And like I said, it looks as though Modern Warfare is off to a good start. The hype train is massive so far, the beta is very solid, and I think in general most people are pretty happy at the moment. Even so though, I'm still kind of skeptical because with what's been promised already, this is shaping up to be the most ambitious COD game that we've seen in a long time. And not just that, but it's also the soft reboot of the biggest games in the series. And so if Infinity Ward don't hit it out of the park with this one, well, the community, I think, is going to slaughter them. One problem that we've seen Battlefield 5 deal with in the last few months since launch is not being able to meet community expectations on time or at all. It's getting harder and harder for even AAA studios to do that. And already the expectation for Modern Warfare to deliver is as high as it gets. And you can bet once the game is out and millions of people have already spent their hard-earned money, it'll be even higher again. So bearing all of that in mind, is Call of Duty Modern Warfare a decent game yet? And the simple answer is, I guess yes so far, but it's probably too early to tell. And maybe even in 6 months' time, it'll still be too early. We'll have to see if the devs can actually follow through with all of these massive content roadmap promises. But anyway, guys, that just about wraps up this quick review. So as always, make sure you let me know what you think of Call of Duty Modern Warfare in the comment section down below. And of course, make sure to let me know if you think that this is a Battlefield killer or if it's just more of the same. Let me know what you think down below. As always, though, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and please feel free to check out the links in the description if you want to see any more of these videos. And also, don't forget you can find my Twitter and Discord links down there as well if you want to keep in touch. And until next time, see you later, and have a good one.